Hey folks, so I know that last time I promised that this video would be about a Star Trek Voyager related topic, but, well, as you know, Voyager is my least favorite of all the Star Trek shows, and last night I was watching an episode of Deep Space Nine, and I got the best idea for another... Alright, what is this? Catherine, my mind is made up, okay? There's nothing you can do that's... What are you doing? What is that supposed to do? What are you doing? What are you doing? Captain? Captain! No! No, not Jean-Luc! Not Jean-Luc! Don't do him like you did Tuvix! No! Please! So, as promised, today's video will be about Star Trek Voyager. And since I usually give Voyager such a hard time, perhaps unfairly, I want to talk about one of the great unsung heroes of the show, other than, of course, the fierce and majestic Captain Janeway herself. I'm talking about a character so brave, so capable, so brilliant, that on the basis of his accomplishments alone, he deserves to be hailed as one of the great legends of Starfleet. I'm talking, of course, about the guy who drives the ship. Let me expound on some of the reasons I think he deserves these accolades in this video, which I am calling... Why Tom Paris is actually Starfleet's #1 badass. If you ask Star Trek fans to list the most badass characters in the franchise, you'll probably hear names like Worf, or Sisko, or Picard in the movies, who was basically Rambo with an antique collection by that point. Jadzia Dax didn't lose too many fights, and was a science badass to boot. Odo was no one you wanted to mess with. Neither was Tasha Yar, though she wasn't around very long. Of course, there's the original space cowboy, Captain James T. Kirk. And let's not forget Spock. He was usually pretty even-tempered, but the dude had the strength of an orangutan on PCP. Would you want him smacking you around? And, like Dax, Spock was a science badass. Chances are the name Tom Paris won't be on that list, but it should be. Let's take a look at the resume. First and foremost, the guy has maybe the most diverse skill set of any major Star Trek character ever, with the possible exception of Data, who was an android who could master new skills at will. It's not that easy for biological life forms, Data! Tom is a great pilot. So great, in fact, that after they get lost in the Delta Quadrant, Captain Janeway appoints him to be Voyager's primary con officer, even though he's technically not even a member of Starfleet at that point, on account of being on a day pass from prison. To be fair, one of the reasons Tom was in that prison in the first place was that he made a piloting error which got 3 officers killed, which resulted in him getting booted from Starfleet, after which he joined the Maquis and got himself arrested and convicted of treason, which is how he wound up doing hard time in a penal colony on the coast of beautiful New Zealand. That'll teach him. Anyway, that easily forgotten detail of his backstory is apparently the only piloting error Tom ever makes. So, yeah, he's pretty good at flying things. And that's not all. He's also shown to be proficient at designing and building spacecraft. He creates the Delta Flyer more or less from scratch. Yes, I know B'Elanna and Harry and Seven help too, and Tuvok, I guess, though all Tuvok does is veto the sweet tail fins. But it's obviously Tom's baby. And not only does he build one Delta Flyer, when that one is destroyed, he just builds another one off camera to replace it. No big deal. Speaking of things that are no big deal, a few years before building the Delta Flyer, Paris modifies a standard shuttle, and then all he does is he uses it to fly Warp 10. My dedicated Star Trek nerds will immediately grasp the significance of that, but just in case anyone else is watching, Warp 10 is like the Star Trek equivalent of the speed of light. According to our current understanding of physics, nothing in the universe can go faster than the speed of light. But on Star Trek, ships go faster than light all the time, thanks to the conceit of warp drive. So, the writers of Star Trek The Next Generation wanted to establish an upper speed limit for ships on their show, and they came up with Warp 10 as the unattainable maximum speed. And in an episode of Voyager, the infamous Threshold, Tom Paris retrofits the Class II shuttlecraft Cochrane with a multispectral subspace quantum transwarp infinite improbability drive and breaks the Warp 10 barrier, attaining the unattainable speed by the end of the first act. And the less said about the rest of the episode, the better. Tom was also hard to beat when it came to combat. Remember in the two-parter Basics that served as the second season finale and the third season premiere when Tom escapes Voyager in a shuttle as Kazon were taking it over, then takes a quick break from repairing the shuttle to destroy the Kazon ship that's chasing him, then persuades the Talaxians to help him recapture Voyager, then sends a secret message to the Doctor who was still aboard Voyager with instructions for how to overload the phasers so Tom can easily disable the ship when he gets there, then retakes control of the ship, repairs it, and rescues the stranded crew? And sure, he doesn't do all of that all by himself. The Doctor and the Talaxians help out, and Ensign Suter sacrifices himself to carry out the plan to overload the phasers, but none of it happens without Paris. He is the mastermind behind the whole operation. He saves the ship and the crew, and he makes it look easy. Tom has other, less obviously useful skills as well. For example, he's an enthusiastic and prolific creator of holodeck programs, including Sandrine's Bar, where the crew is seen hanging out during their off hours in the show's early seasons, Captain Proton, Fairhaven, and the smart-ass rewrite of the Doctor's Photons Be Free holo novel. In fact, Tom is so good at writing holo programs that he starts writing them full-time after Voyager makes it home. At the crew reunion at the beginning of the series finale, Tom is depicted as a successful holo novelist, happily retired from Starfleet, though that particular development would have been a better fit for the Doctor, whose writing of a holo novel was the sole basis for an entire episode, and it doesn't matter anyway because Janeway went back in time and erased that future because it's Star Trek and that option is always on the table and she thinks she's God or something, I guess. I mean, imagine the hubris of using time travel to erase reality because you decided that things didn't turn out as good as they could have. I mean, who the hell does she think? On the other hand, perhaps that subject would be best left to be addressed in its own video. But I digress. My point is, Tom is good at pretty much everything we ever see him do. Piloting, fighting, engineering, designing, and constructing spacecraft. Okay, he wasn't the ideal medic to assist the Doctor, but Tom admitted that. And hey, isn't knowing one's own limitations an important skill in and of itself? Dirty Harry certainly seemed to think so. And who am I to argue with Dirty Harry? Tom is so absurdly competent in such a diverse variety of fields that I'm pretty sure if he had been a woman, people would have complained that he was too much of a Mary Sue. In fact, Tom is such a peerless badass that the only argument against his untouchable, overwhelming badassery I can come up with is that his blinding awesomeness is the probably mostly accidental product of Can you see that? It says bad writing. Or more specifically, lazy writing. See, the writers of Voyager never seemed to pay too much attention to developing their characters in consistent, meaningful ways. And the result of that was that at the end of the series, most of the main cast, including Tom, were more or less exactly the same people they were when they started. True, Tom and B'Elanna do eventually get married, off camera, but when two characters are randomly paired off into a romance with each other, that's usually the dramatic equivalent of two singles wrestlers being put into a tag team together. It's creative's way of saying, we don't know what else to do with them, so let's try this. The members of the crew of Voyager are stranded in the Delta Quadrant for 7 years, cut off for most of that time from their friends and family and the rest of Starfleet, surrounded by thousands and thousands of light years of uncharted space and hostile, strange aliens. But that experience, generally speaking, doesn't really change them at all. And no, Harry inexplicably switching from the clarinet to the saxophone does not count as character development. Yeah, by the way, if you ever get an angry Janeway in your monitor, just cover it with a rag or a t-shirt or something, keep quiet for a few minutes, she'll lose interest and leave on her own. Instead of developing its characters throughout the course of its run, Voyager tended to assign characteristics based on what was required for a given episode. So when they needed someone to explain the 1936 Ford truck they just found floating in space to the rest of the crew, guess what? Antique cars are one of Tom's hobbies. When they wanted to do a Hiroshima episode, oh, by the way, Neelix witnessed the horrifying aftermath of a weapon of mass destruction being deployed on a populated moon of his home planet. When they wanted to do a boxing episode, hey, we forgot to mention it before, but Chakotay boxed when he was younger. And guess what else? Boothby was his trainer. Yeah, that Boothby, the groundskeeper at Starfleet Academy who was Captain Picard's mentor, because we're really bad at creating our own memorable recurring characters. After 7 years of this, each of the members of Voyager's main cast wound up with an eclectic collection of character traits, skills, and bits of backstory that were incredibly important for one episode and then rarely, if ever, even mentioned again. There were exceptions to this. The Doctor's characterization proceeded in fits and starts, but he did manage to change a little bit from the first episode to the last, and the characterization of Seven of Nine was actually handled fairly well for the most part, at least right up until they decided to have her fall in love with Chakotay with like 5 minutes left in the series. But generally speaking, haphazard, quickly forgotten characterizations were the rule on Voyager. That's how we wind up with a character like Tom Paris, a brilliant pilot, a courageous and resourceful fighter who heroically saves the lives of his shipmates on numerous occasions, a genius who has mastered advanced warp theory, starship design and construction, and holoprogramming, an amateur historian with a vast well of knowledge of Earth history that frequently proves very useful, and, oh yeah, a pioneer whose name deserves to be spoken alongside those of the greatest scientists and explorers who ever lived, who broke the Warp 10 barrier in a shuttlecraft he modified in his spare time. And despite all those accomplishments, he's still the guy who drives the ship. So yes, judged on his achievements and his demonstrated skills, Tom Paris is actually Starfleet's all-time #1 badass, but that's mostly because he was a character on such a shabbily scripted show. So shabbily scripted a show, in fact, that they made Daddy Issues, a fairly consistent part of Tom's character, introduced Tom's father, Admiral Owen Paris, as a recurring character midway through the second-to-last season of the show, and then ended the series without Tom and his father ever having a single scene together. I mean, they introduce Admiral Paris as the officer in charge of the Pathfinder Project, which is dedicated to establishing communications between Voyager and the Delta Quadrant. They show us that Admiral Paris keeps a photo of Tom on his desk, and the series ends without them even having a single on-screen conversation. Admiral Paris didn't have to be the guy in charge of the Pathfinder Project. That could have been anyone. Why introduce that character at all unless you're setting up some kind of resolution involving him and his son? Was there no one at any point during the production of the show's final few episodes who raised their hand and said, we're not gonna forget to tie up the story between Tom and his father, right? Admiral Paris hails the ship when Voyager makes it back to the Alpha Quadrant in the final moments of the last episode. He's on the view screen, for Christ's sake. And Tom's right there. Did nobody think any kind of meaningful exchange was in order at that point? Welcome home, son? Hi, Dad? Something? Were the producers even watching their own show at this point? Who wrote this shit? I'm okay. Reports of my immolation are greatly exaggerated. And actually, I didn't even get a tan, did I? God damn it. Anyway, hope you enjoyed this one. If you did and you want to watch more Trek Actually videos and you haven't seen some of the earlier episodes in the series, of course, you can go down into the description box of this video. There's a link to the playlist. You can watch all of the other episodes of Trek Actually if this turns out to be your kind of thing. And also, of course, if you enjoy this video and other videos I've done and you want to help me make more videos, you can go to patreon.com/Steve Shives to become a patron of this channel for as little as $1 a month. And also, if you want, you can pledge even more than $1 a month if that's your thing. Far be it for me to tell you how much to pledge. And for the next episode of Trek Actually, I'm going to delve into a corner of the franchise that I haven't really touched yet, and that is Enterprise. The next episode of Trek Actually will deal with a topic relating to Star Trek Enterprise. And I have said often that Voyager is my least favorite Star Trek show. Chances are Enterprise is your least favorite Star Trek show. So hopefully we could all look forward to that next time. Thanks for watching, everybody.